Hi, Tracy here with another scrapbooking process video. Today, this is actually a bonus process video because this process actually came from a live stream scrap with me that I did over on Patreon with my Patreon supporters. And I thought that this might also make a pretty good process video. So I just took the footage, and the footage is going to look quite a bit different with some comments and so on every once in a while. Just the footage is a little bit different with me up in the corner, but I thought that you guys might want to see this process anyhow. So I'm starting off with a 4x6 photo that is of my daughter and her 3 friends. And then I also have 2 other secondary photos that are, so the first pose is more of, I guess, a serious pose, and the second 2 are more fun poses. And I printed those smaller. They're printed at 2.5 by 3.5. And so they're cropped in a little bit more and they are smaller. So I'm just layering those so that they cover up the fireplace on that larger photo. And I think that that is going to look pretty good. I'm going to make some changes to the way that those photos are layered, but for now, that's just the gist of it. I'm going to grab some scraps over here, and this is just a bag full of scraps that I have on hand. They're not sorted or anything. They were leftovers from a stash kit that I made a couple of years back, and I just never did put it back into my stash. So I thought that there might be some papers in this bunch of papers from my stash. And I'm also pulling out, this is the April 2021 hip kit that I did scrapbook one layout from, at least, maybe 2, but I know I did 1. And I'm just looking through what's left of that. Obviously, there's lots and lots left. The hip kit comes with tons and tons of supplies. What really stood out at me was this Heidi Swapp background paper. So it's got those beautiful pinks and purples and orangey colors all together. It's from the Heidi Swapp Carefree collection. I just grabbed a piece of Color Box white cardstock. This is very inexpensive and it's not very sturdy, but it's really great to have an inexpensive cardstock around the scrap room just for doing things like this. Like, I just needed a white mat on this. It didn't have to be good solid cardstock. It just needed to do the trick. It just needed to add a little bit of a white border, because I didn't print this with a white border. My printer does allow me to do that, but I just wasn't thinking that I wanted one when I printed it. So as you can see, I trimmed it down so that the edge was not wide enough at first. So that's another benefit of using thinner cardstock, is I could just remat it again without having to even pull off the old one. It turns out it didn't matter, because that edge that was not as wide as the other edges is going to be completely covered up by these other photos anyways. Now I'm just arranging these so that there's a little bit more negative space in the bottom of that top photo, like their waists and stuff. There's nothing all that interesting going on there. So if I'm going to layer these 2, it makes sense to layer them this way so that the bottom one is on top of the top one. Layered over top of the top one, if that makes sense. I'm using top and bottom in 2 different ways in that sentence, but I hope you understand what I mean. These are some black and white pieces of paper, mostly from Felicity Jane, but there's a couple of others in here. And I'm looking for some black and white just to do some extra matting with. And so I'm grabbing this one. It is by Doodlebug Designs, and it is from the Craft in Color collection, which is really, really a beautiful, beautiful collection with lots of papers that read as solids, but they're actually interesting little patterns. So I picked this tiny little polka dot, and I went back to my stash and grabbed that black and white diagonal from Felicity Jane, because that is my favorite piece of paper of all times. I have scrapbooked with that paper so much. I just love it as a way to add some boldness to a layout. And where these are teenagers that I'm scrapbooking and they kind of dressed all up funky to go out for the night, I wanted to really emphasize, like, I wanted this layout to have a bold, youthful kind of feel to it, as opposed to a more reserved or fancy kind of look. So I think that the black matting, that extra bit of black matting, does a good job of making that 4x6 photo stand out a little bit from the other two accent photos or fun photos. And now I do want to do a little bit of layering behind these photos. So I grabbed this turquoisey, greeny, bluey kind of color and stuck it under there. Now the hearts are going sideways, but I kind of don't care because you can't really even tell that they're hearts. Those are like white polka dotted hearts. All of these papers right here are from my stash, so especially the little cut up ones, I'm not going to know where they came from. Now this paper is from that hip kit, and it is from the Maggie Holmes Garden Party collection that came in that April kit. And I'm really liking this paper. It adds a bit of a fancy touch to this because the girls did dress up fancy to go out mini golfing. They thought it was hilarious to get dressed up like super, super fancy and then do something not very fancy like play mini golf. So adding this piece of Maggie Holmes floral paper just it picks up on the idea that that they were dressed up fancy. So I am looking for more layers for behind my photos. It feels like those other two horizontal photos are like hanging off the edge of the layout because they're not backed with anything. As I was looking through my scraps, I noticed that pink and cream colored polka dot, which is also super bold, and I thought maybe I'll use that instead of or in addition to that black and white diagonal stripe that I'm using for boldness, to add some boldness. And I'm thinking I'm going to want to add the majority of my boldness on the far right hand side of this page, so it'll be like a strip going down the edge of the paper. I did that recently on another page as well. I'm thinking that whatever other piece of paper goes in these layers, it should have pink in it. And so I went to my stash and grabbed my pink scraps, which I keep in these large Ziploc bags that I've cut the zippers off of. And I am just basically auditioning a couple of different papers. That one introduces red and I don't want to introduce red. This one doesn't have enough pink, just basically the outlining on the chat bubbles are pink. But this one has plenty of pink, and it also has that nice light bluey greeny color. This is from the Holly Jolly collection from the Hip Kit Club, so this would have been part of a hip kit, probably a December or holiday themed one. But a good example of how you can reuse. Oh, I lost my photo and it was stuck to the back of my trimmer, so I now know to check underneath of things that underneath of my tools when I've lost something, because that's happened a couple of times. So I want to do this, but now the problem here is, wow, what a lot of rectangles. There's too much, right? Before I lose another photo, I've decided to just glue these photos down using my ATG just to one another so that I can now work with them as a whole piece instead of as individual parts. Now there's too many lines and angles, way too many rectangles on this page, so I need to soften this layer if I do use this layer. I want it to be a circle that is about as wide in diameter as that piece of pattern paper it's going to be layered behind. So I just marked the top and bottom of that, and I grabbed my glass cutting mat. This one is by Slice. I used to have a Slice. That was my first die cutting machine. You can't buy them anymore. And my cutting mat is very, very, very dirty. What I do with it is I run some Zig 2-way glue over it, and then I put this piece of it's homemade acetate. It's complicated. I think I might do a separate video about circle cutting and using a glass mat and that sort of thing. So keep an eye out on my channel at some point for that. But anyhow, I was just explaining how this is sticky and it's dirty because it's sticky. I do have a cover for it, but it's dirty anyways. I need to clean it and re-glue it and use the cover that I have for it more regularly. So as you can see, I just cut my circle, and I only needed a half because it's going to be peeking out from behind a layer, and I didn't have a big enough piece for a full circle, so this is all that I need. Now it's not far enough over, so I'm going to actually replace this cardstock with something similar. And so I'm going into my stash and looking, and actually not into my stash, but just like these are my scraps that were on my desk already. This was from that kit that I didn't use all of it a long time ago. That might have been 3 years ago at this point. And so, yeah, this is more substantial. That's better. I do want to kind of trim it down a little bit and give it a bit of a torn edge to it. And this is looking pretty good. And see how that circle just softens everything? There were way too many sharp angles and straight lines on this page, so it needed something curvy. I'm just taking my Ranger Distress tool and just making the edges of this circle all shabby. And then of course I'm going to outline it. I am using my Faber-Castell Pitt pen because I can't find my Sharpie pen anymore. And I'm going to outline this layer as well. And usually once I start outlining, I just go ahead and outline them all. It does give the papers a bit more of a pulled together look. And I like how that also introduces some black on that really light Christmas paper, the Holly Jolly with the polka dots. It was looking a little bit too white, and so I am going to bring some more white into this layout. I just don't know how yet. So when I ran my glue down the edge of this circle, I didn't run it quite close enough to the edge, so I just used my finger to push that glue back so it wasn't exposed. The ATG is great for that. The adhesive is very forgiving, so if you change your mind, you can always just rub it off with your finger. So I keep going back to that diagonal paper edge, and at this point I've decided I do want to use it. I cut down my 12 by 12 background paper there, that Heidi Swapp paper, just with a slightly off, it's on a slight angle. I cut it at a slight angle is what I'm trying to say. So now I am gluing that background diagonal piece to my craft mat, like to my work mat at the 12-inch mark. And then I'm lining up my other paper so that this whole thing makes a perfect 12 by 12 square again, even though I have kind of cut off part of it. That's my way of doing that, but there are other ways to do it as well. You could measure and do all sorts of things. You could cut it, you could attach it and then trim it down to 12 inches. You could do lots of different things. So now I'm thinking that I'll want some journaling below these photos and a title above, and that I'm thinking that both of those will land on that paper, that paper that I replaced. And by the way, that is by Basic Gray. It's from the Bow Ties collection. So old scraps. Basic Gray doesn't even make paper anymore. Now, I thought I definitely wanted some boldness over here on this side, on the left side. And so I used a punch. This is a notebook paper punch. And I thought I might add a little bit of this diagonal black and white paper over here in the form of a punch that's folded around the edge of the page. I used to do this all the time and I really like the look. So I just punched it and I wasn't sure. It just kind of depends on once my embellishment phase comes, whether that's going to hold up or not. So I just kind of put it in that little valet tray and I will wait and think about it and decide later. And that's typically my approach when I'm not sure what to do about something. I just do it a little bit and then I wait and see to see what I want to do. Now, I haven't forgotten about this paper here, and I don't necessarily want to add it to the layers. I think I want to add it to the background. So I don't really hate this look right here of the black and white stripe on the one side and then that bold polka dot on the other side. I think that they work well together. The only problem is that that polka dot has cream instead of white. And so I'm thinking about it. I'm just going to think about what I want to do here. So I'll leave it like that so I don't forget the idea. And then I'm just familiarizing myself with what embellishments I have. These work really well. Some of these are more Easter themed, so I'm just pulling out the ones that are not Easter themed. These are Maggie Holmes puffy stickers. This is a font that I'm actually very unlikely to use both now and maybe ever. So I'm actually going to put it in a little giveaway pack that I have that I give every month. I do a little giveaway on Patreon. So now I'm just going to put that in the package so that I don't forget. and then I will come back and start to figure out what I'm going to do with my embellishments. So I knew what font I didn't want to use. So I pulled over my Thickers Rascog, and I'm just showing that all 3 tiers have letter stickers. That's how many letter stickers I have, which is why I really don't need that other set. And I've got a ton of black ones, and black ones that I love. So I will allow somebody else to enjoy those beautiful garden party letter thickers from the Maggie Holmes collection. Now, what I did pull out here was a set of Amy Tangerine thickers. They're called Afterglow, and they are my favorite. I have 2 sets of them, and I'm starting to run a little low on some of the main letters that I use over and over again, but I do have enough for the title. I'm settling on the title So Fancy, and at first I thought I'd do fancy in these big letters and then do so in some smaller letter stickers, maybe some tile letter stickers, or maybe some scripty letter stickers. Then it became clear to me that I actually have room here to put the word so right in front of fancy. And I like this font so much that I'm just going to put both words in the same font. And it fits really nicely here. So I'm just going to adhere it as I showed. And using my thicker alignment tools really makes it very easy to place your stickers, as you can tell. And I just took 2 of the little chevrons and put them in front of the word so, just to fill up some of that space. I specifically left some space there. I thought I'd use an arrow, but when I saw that there were 2 chevrons in these letter stickers, I thought I'd use that instead. Now, because these are foam letter stickers, you can play around with them a little bit, like they have some bend to them. So I was just playing around with how to make some of them look a little funky. So I'm really liking this, actually. I like this look. So I think I'm going to go with it. So I'm going to cut down I'm not going to do that. That was just a little piece of vellum that was sitting off to the side. So yeah, one more chance to change my mind and do the diagonal paper punch thing, but I'm not going to do that. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually modify this pattern paper, and there are a couple of different ways that you can do this. I'm going to do a punch, but you could also use a paint dauber or any kind of circular shape or even freehand it to paint over these polka dots with white paint. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm modifying my pattern paper. I really, really love this paper, love the design, but I do not love that the circles are cream instead of white, especially where I'm trying to balance out that really bright white that's in the pattern paper that I cut into a circle, the one by the Hip Kit Club. So what I'm doing is, it's not exactly the right size punch. My 1/2 inch punch was a little bit too small, and this is a 3/4 inch punch, and it is too big, but it's not too big. So it actually makes for an even more bold pattern than what the pattern paper actually already was. And I'm going with 2 strips of white polka dots on this paper. And I gave a little bit of thought to how I might want to glue these down. And in retrospect, what I didn't think of until the very end was using my Xyron Create-A sticker, the little, whatever it's called. I think it's like a 3-inch one, or no, it's, I think it's like 1.5 inches. The little one that's the shape of an X. That would have been ideal, because then these polka dots would have had adhesive on them from edge to edge, and they would have sat a lot more flat without having to, I'm having to be pretty painstakingly detailed about putting this glue. I'm using Tombow Mono Aqua, which is good glue for gluing paper to paper. But I'm having to make sure it's all the way to the edge, but not so much that it's going to ooze out and make a mess of my paper, right? So I think it would have been easier to just run it through my Xyron X. But I hadn't thought of that until I only have about 1 or 2 left. That's when I thought of it. So too late. And it does look good this way too. It just took a little bit more caution. I don't want this to have a punched look. I want it to look like that was just the paper, right? Like that's just what the paper looked like. I'm not trying to draw your attention. This is not the place that I want to be adding interesting details because it's on the outside edge of the layout. It's not part of the storytelling. It's not where the photo is. I want it to blend in. But I do want it to be bold to kind of counterbalance the boldness on the other side of this layout. So I'm going to first of all, let's just cut these extra little circles off so that this paper will fit better in my trimmer. This paper seems to be by Ellie Studio. It doesn't have a manufacturer's strip on it, but I recognize the design on the other side. So this is probably from Ellie Studio, which I didn't even know I had any of their 12 by 12 paper. So I'm cutting down again my background paper so that I've got room for this little edge of polka dot paper to show. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm gluing with temporary adhesive. I'm gluing this down to my work mat, and then I will line it up so that the whole thing measures 12 by 12. But when I do that, you only see this little bit and you don't see the other whole row that I took the time to make. And also I think I just like it better with more of it showing. So I'm cutting my paper down now to 11 inches. So now it's 11 by 12. And that's just going to give me 1 inch showing of this beautiful polka dotted paper that I kind of customized. So see how now it's beautiful white and it's not that kind of, it was looking drab. The paper itself isn't drab, but just relative to all the white on this, it was looking washed out or drab because it was so cream compared to everything else on the page that was white. I am going to outline these because now I really do like it, just the white and pink. It's really beautiful. And if it were not for the really bold black and white on the other side, I would have left it that way. But I'm introducing a little bit of black to this pattern by outlining it with my fine Faber-Castell Pip pen. And that just introduces a tiny, tiny bit of black. You can't even really see it from this far away, but in the close-ups you'll be able to see it. It just provides a little bit more balance so that definitely the black and white is more bold than the polka dot, but it's closer this way. I am going to add some black thread sewing to this layout. It's just going to take me a few minutes to thread it because my eyes aren't what they used to be. So let's change the camera angle because looking at the top of a sewing machine is not very helpful. So I have this it's a Janome sewing machine. You do have to plug it in for it to work. I forgot that for a second there. It's a Janome, I don't know how you pronounce that. I think it's Janome sewing machine. I think it's called New Home. It used to be called the Sew Mini, S-E-W, Sew Mini. But now I think it's called New Home. And it's just a half-size sewing machine. It is so light I can lift it with a single hand, which is really great. I store it kind of high on a shelf, and so it's good to be able to just lift it up and down from the shelf with one hand, just like I'm doing right now. So that just adds a little bit of finishing detail to that outside edges of the background paper. And I have just the right amount of space here now to put my center layers in the middle of this. And I think that it looks pretty good like that. I went into my stash and I sort my die cuts in a couple of different ways, but one of the ways is in these little Ziploc baggies. They're little sandwich bags, and I keep them by collection when I'm keeping it by collection. This is how I keep them. Sometimes I sort them by color. So I had these, I was specifically looking for Maggie Holmes die cuts because there is Maggie Holmes paper on this page, and I just felt like those embellishments would be bold and kind of have the vibe that I'm looking for. But I also found these frames from the Hip Kit Club from an old kit, and I thought that they worked really well too. So I'm going to put them in these two places, which just kind of layering them on the top and the bottom of this, almost like a strip. It almost makes it look like a photo strip now. off to the side here. And I'm going to use wet glue just because it's hard to get my ATG on in such a tiny little spot. I'm only adhering it on the little legs of those frames because I might want to pop them up or tuck something else underneath, or who knows what I'm going to want to do. So I'm basically just gluing it where it's layered under the photo. And then the part that's sticking out is not glued down at all. That way I can curl it up or do something else with it later. Now these are Garden Party Thicker stickers. And I really want to use this one that says "You Make Me Smile." So I cut it off so that it would be easy to layer it underneath of that photo. And then I really like how that flower looks beside it as well, also from the same set. These are like those nice, soft, pliable foam stickers, like not foam, but puffy stickers. I also grabbed a butterfly from the chipboard sheet. This is also from the Maggie Holmes Garden Party collection. It also came in the hip kit. And now this Love This is a really nice way to cover up the TV here. There was a video game that was Zelda on the TV, which I love, but it's not part of this memory, and it kind of draws your eye. It's a very distracting part of the photo. There's just a little hair there that I had to get rid of. And when I put "I Love This," even though it doesn't completely cover the TV, it does a really good job of making that TV just kind of disappear off in the background instead of seeming like such a bold part of the photo. I'm using my hot off the press journaling stencil here, or template, to draw some journaling lines. And these long lines do come in two parts, so you just have to join the two of them together after you're finished drawing it. So I'll do that right now. And I didn't do a great job. My eyes were doing something weird that made me not draw where I thought I was drawing. But once you put the writing on it, you can't even see it anymore. So I'm just journaling off the top of my head, as I almost always do, and it says Sophie turned 15 on Wednesday, so this weekend she had Maddie, Corey, and Ty over. They dressed up fancy and went to glow-in-the-dark mini golf. Then they went to Eastside Mario's and home for a sleepover. Such great friends. And basically, I ran out of journaling after the word sleepover, so I would have ended up with, so that would have been where it ended, but there was extra space there, so I just wrote "such good friends" just to fill in the space a little bit. So I always am thinking of like a almost like a throwaway phrase. Like, it's not like I don't mean that they're good friends, but I didn't have to say that, but it just fills the space, right? I used my Studio Calico roller date stamp. That's a very old roller date stamp, but it does go all the way to 2023. So it's basically the only roller date stamp I'm using now because mine are all too old. And I just double stamped there so that it has that kind of messy office look to it. And now I am centering this whole entire thing so that it's centered from left to right, but then it sits low on the page instead of being centered vertically on the page. I had forgotten to glue down that one little die cut frame from the Hip Kit Club, so just doing that now. And then I also noticed that some things weren't glued down properly, so I'm just adding them there, pulling up the edges to add just a little bit of lift, just add some interest. And now the majority of this page is actually done. And now all that I have to do is think about what kind of extra little embellishments I want. I don't want to do sprinkling on this because too much of this page is filled up with stuff already. And I find that sprinkles, like splatters and ink splats and that sort of thing, just look a little bit too overwhelming or something when I have a page that has this much on it. I think that splatter looks really, really great on a page with a lot of negative space on it, and this one doesn't have so much negative space. So instead of splatter, I'm going to put more intentional little embellishments, and I'm keeping to these 3 embellishment clusters that I've already kind of started on the page. So in each of these 3 places, I put 1 heart wood veneer. And then I'm going back and I'm putting 1 or 2 of these white and black chipboard stickers from the Maggie Holmes chipboard. And then I'm going to add a single star wood veneer to each of those clusters as well. And I'm being very, very intentional about the 3 clusters. Sometimes I'll go with 3-ish clusters, like I might have 3 clusters, but one of them kind of wanders out so far that it becomes its own cluster or that sort of thing. But because this page has a lot going on, there's a lot for your eye to take in. And so I'm being a lot more intentional about these clusters and using them as a tool to keep your eye and your mind looking at and thinking about what I want it to be looking at and thinking about. So these 3 places form a visual triangle that all 3 of the lines of that visual triangle go straight through my photos and make you look at all these cute teenagers and the shenanigans that they were up to. I changed my mind and wanted to add a little pink bow to this Love This. And it was already sticky there below the word this from the heart. And so I was kind of thinking maybe I'll just leave the heart there, but it didn't look right there. So I put it up above this instead. It just needed to be a bit more balanced. It was too many things were low on that sticker. It needed something up at the top to balance out with the bow being at the bottom. So I just used, because it's a puffy sticker, it's basically plastic. And so I just took a wet, what is it called? A baby wipe. And just basically wiped off the stickiness. And here I was just kind of like, am I going to do this or not? Like there's already a lot going on and I didn't want to over embellish this one, but I took these little crystals. These are by Say It in Crystals by Prima. And I just added one to each of those clusters of my visual triangle again. So here's how this one turned out. I'm really, really pleased with it. I think it has the same fun energy as the photos and as the night was. This was actually just taken last night, so it was fun to scrapbook something so immediate. Leave me a comment and let me know, are you an immediate scrapbooker or are you more of an archival type of scrapbooker where you grab some photos from before and scrapbook them? Either way is of course fine, and many people scrapbook both ways, but I'd love to hear how you do it. Take care and have a really great scrappy week, and check out the links below for other videos from me, or to subscribe to my channel, or to check out the Facebook challenge group. Take care and have a really great scrappy week.